Hello, everyone, and welcome to the reading for today. It is Genesis chapter 4. It is in the evening time here in the United States, morning time over there in the Philippines, and probably really early morning time in Africa. Chapter 4 is about the story of Cain and Abel. So let's begin the reading. Now, Adam knew Eve, his wife. The word knew means to have sex with. Okay? How do we know this? Because, hello, Adam already knew who Eve was even before this. So it wouldn't say, oh, he all of a sudden knew who Eve was. No. Knew means to have sex with. How do we know this? By what's been said next. Adam knew Eve, his wife, so Eve was his wife in the eyes of God, and she conceived, that means she got pregnant, and she bore Cain, that means she gave birth to Cain, okay, Cain, who is the older brother. Cain is the older brother, okay, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord, referencing that everything comes from the Lord. The Lord is the creator of everything. Then she bore again, meaning got pregnant and gave birth again. This time, his brother Abel. Okay? Now, Abel was a keeper of sheep. Keeper of sheep. Okay? Now, think about that. What are stewards, Christian stewards, supposed to be caring for? The sheep. You see the connection? But Cain was a tiller of the ground. In other words, he was a farmer, basically. He was a farmer that did mainly grain, mainly like fruits, vegetables, things like that. Whereas Abel was the keeper of sheep. He was an animal person, an animal caretaker. Here we see Luke chapter 11, verse 50 and 51. And in the process of time, it came to pass. So in the process of time, meaning not the next day, not that very day, but over time, in other words, it came to pass, it happened, that Cain brought an offering of the fruit. Now, first of all, notice that Cain and Abel were old enough to do work. They weren't children, okay? They were probably either teenagers or rounding on up to young adults, or even full-grown adults, okay? We don't know exactly, but we do know that they were old enough to do actual manual labor and work and be able to do many things. You know. Anyway, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. So he brought an offering. He goes, okay, I want to give something to the Lord, to thank the Lord for blessing me and blessing my life. So I want to give the fruit because that's what I take care of. That's what I'm a shepherd of. Okay. Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock. So the first baby of the sheep and their fat. Okay. Now, we don't know if it was already dead or if it was alive. Judging by this fact that it said they're fat, I would reference more likely that it was that this animal was already dead. Okay. And the Lord respected Abel for his offering. Okay. But he did not respect Cain and his offering. Why was that? Why was it that he respected Abel's offering but not Cain's offering? So let me say it this way. Abel's offering was done with the right motives in Abel's heart. With humility, with selflessness, with joy and happiness. Cain's offering, because of how God reacted, more than likely was done with the wrong motive in mind. How does this relate to you and me? Let me explain. Okay? There are many times in life where we can do things and choose to do actions and have all the right desires to do those actions, okay, but have the completely wrong motive. And the Bible makes clear this point. Okay, it says such things as, for example, it says in many different, sorry, my brain just lagged there for a minute. In many different verses in the Bible, it talks about how, I gotta look at the verse again because my brain farted again. Okay, so we're talking about motive. So there are verses in the Bible that talk about you doing things and you having the wrong motive in your heart, so that's why God's not blessing you for it, and that's why God's not doing this, and that's why God's not doing that, because the motive you have for it is wrong. Remember the verse that says something like, you don't have because you don't ask, and when you do ask, you ask with the wrong motives. You get the idea? You have to ask with the right motives. So here we see the verse, Hebrews 11:4. Hebrews 11:4. Okay? That's the second New Testament verse we see so far. But he did not respect Cain and his offering, and Cain was very angry. Cain was angry at God, and his countenance fell. Countenance. I'm thinking that basically is referencing towards the attitude of his heart, his confidence, his trust in the Lord, anything along that lines. Okay, but you would actually have to look up the word countenance to know what it means. So let me look on my phone real quick because I don't have my dictionary out with me. Let me just Google real quick the word countenance. Okay. Okay, so the word countenance means a person's face or facial expressions. Okay, so it is the look on a person's face, in other words. Okay, so Cain was very angry. He was angry that God did not look on his offering the same as, so right then and there he's making another mistake. Comparing and competing. I should get the exact same attention from God that someone else does. God should do for me the same as he does for someone else. Okay? You see the problem with that. Oh, I want God to do exactly this for me, and this is how God's supposed to act, and this is how God's supposed to do for me, and this is how God, no worries, this is how God is supposed to do for me, and this is how God does this and does that, okay? You know, oftentimes in life, we try to tell God how things should be done in our life. We try to tell God, this is supposed to happen this way, this is supposed to happen this way. And we tell God that, God, here's how you're going to bless me. No. God chooses how he blesses us however he wants. He says things to such people as like, to one person I give this gift, to another person I give this gift, right? All those things. Okay? It means that God is the creator of everything. He has every right to give to each person as he so chooses. Okay? So, at this point, Cain has entertained bad thinking in his head. Okay? And he has allowed that bad thinking to then transform into his heart by having bad emotions based on his bad thinking. Okay? That's why he's angry. Now remember, the Bible says, in your anger do not sin. So him being angry is not a sin yet. Okay? And his countenance fell, meaning his facial expressions fell. Okay? So the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? By the way, that's supposed to be Luke 11:50 and 51. So it's two verses, 11:50 and 51. So just letting you know. Anyway, he says, why are you angry? In other words, what's the reason? Now, God already knows why he's angry. Come on now. It doesn't take a genius to figure out why he's angry. Comparing and competing. Okay? That's why he's angry. He did not get the exact same attention from God that his brother got. So what? Big deal. Get over it. Okay? But he's basically saying, why are you paying attention to these bad thoughts and these bad emotions that you're having? Why are you giving it attention? Focus on me, not the storm. Not what's going on inside, not the storm raging inside of you. Okay? And he says, why has your countenance failed? Meaning, why has your face changed? Okay? And you see, guys, God already knows all this. He's trying to make Cain aware of what's going on mentally and emotionally. Because if God doesn't make him aware of it, then we know what happens next. Okay? God gives him, even in the correcting, God gives him advice. Listen, if you do well, meaning if you do good, will you not be accepted? In other words, look, all you have to do is obey me, and regardless of what kind of attention I give you, it's going to be accepted. You're going to be accepted by me. You're going to be loved by me. Okay? Now, the other verse that I'm sure she's worked on is Hebrews 11:4. That was the second one that's been listed so far. Okay? Hebrews 11:4. That was, and then we got 1 John 3:12 through 15 coming up here shortly. And then we have another John, which is John 8:44. And then we have 1 Corinthians 8:11 through 13. All of those. And then right after that, we have Hebrews 12:24. So all of those are like right after each other. So she's got a lot of work in the next few minutes to drop a bunch of verses, actually. Anyway, let's continue. Will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, meaning if you don't obey me, sin lies at the door. Meaning sin is waiting right around the corner to trap you, trip you up, and snag you. Okay? And its desire, meaning the desire of sin, is for you. Sin desires you. Sin desires you. It desires to trick you. It desires to want you to fall. But you should rule over it. Rule over it. Conquer it. In other words. Now, Cain talked with Abel, his brother. So Cain talked to his brother. He's like, okay, I need to address my brother. I need to talk to my brother about this. Okay? So Cain talked to his brother. And it came to pass when they were in the field. Okay, so they were standing in the field talking about this. Then Cain decided, because he wasn't paying attention to what was going on inside of himself, even though God had given him attention to it, right? Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and killed him. This is where we see 1 John 3:12 through 15. 1 John 3:12 through 15. Okay? It's a total of 3 verses. 12, 13, 14. I believe. Maybe even 15. Anyway. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel? So, again, the Lord knows everything. He knows what happened to Abel. Okay? He has given man free will to make choices. Okay? The next verse coming up for you, little mama, is John 8:44. John 8:44. And 1 Corinthians 8:11 through 13. Okay? Anyway, as I said, the Lord knows what happened to Abel. He knows. But he's trying to give Cain the opportunity to own up to his actions. Just like he gave Adam and Eve an opportunity. And this should speak something to us. Because even though we were not in the Garden of Eden, actually being the ones to eat the fruit, through our own lives, somewhere in our life came the first moment that we chose to sin. Keyword there, chose. We chose to sin. So in that moment, we are doing exactly, now for me, I was a little kid and I lied to get out of trouble. Okay. That was the first sin I remember. Now I'm sure there probably was other ones, but that's the first one that pops in my head. I lied to get out of trouble. I willingly lied. And this is something common with kids. When they get to a certain age, they start lying. Okay. Maybe even before that, there would be a little bit of hatred, but it's more like kid hatred, where you're like, they took my toy, something like that. Anyway, all of us have that moment where we have failed to be sinless on our own power. And in that moment, when we fail to be sinless, okay, in our own power, in our own ability, on our own accord, okay, we have eaten of the fruit that was forbidden, basically, in a spiritual way. Okay? In other words, just as Adam fell to sin by eating something, by disobeying God, and just as Eve fell to sin by disobeying what was told to her from God, and just as Cain disobeyed God's warning and ended up killing his brother, we too, in those moments when we first sinned, we choose willingly to disobey God. Okay? So Cain killed Abel. Okay? The Lord is giving him a chance to fess up. The word would be fess up, meaning tell the truth. Okay? Own up to his actions. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" He said, so he being Cain, said, "I do not know." There's a line right there. It's John 8:44. John 8:44. Okay, is the first one, and the second one is 1 Corinthians 8:11 through 13. Sorry, I just noticed that comment. Anyway, he said, "I do not know." And he said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" In other words, even though I'm family, am I supposed to be responsible for my brother? He's trying to make excuses. And he said, meaning God, said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Here we see Hebrews chapter 12, verse 24. Okay? Now, again, God knows exactly what happened. He sees all. He knows all. He knows Cain killed Abel. He's giving him a chance to tell the truth. Cain didn't tell the truth. He tried to make an excuse. Okay? So he's saying, "Hey, whatever look, you did something wrong. You did something bad." He said, "Your brother's blood cries out to me for justice." So now you are cursed. Same thing that happened with Adam and Eve. They did something wrong, they paid a penalty. So now you are cursed from the earth. You are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. In other words, you chose to kill your brother. And because you chose to kill your brother, the earth received that blood, soaked it up, and now that blood cries out to me for justice. So now I'm going to deal you a punishment for your disobedience, for your sin. And he said, when you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength for you. Okay? It shall no longer yield its strength. It shall no longer give you anything. A fugitive is someone that runs away and is on the run from the law because they've done something wrong. And a vagabond, you shall be on earth, like a nomad, a person that doesn't have a home. Good job, good job. I'm sure you're working on the next one. The Hebrews 12:24. Anyway, and Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Well, if you ask me, the punishment is not greater. It only feels like it's greater. And that's what we do a lot of times. We think that what God is giving us is greater than what we can handle. But remember, the Lord never lets us go through anything that we cannot handle with his strength. I will never let you, you will never be tempted beyond what you can bear, right? Now, this isn't tempted, this is punishment, but I kind of think that it goes along the same route, okay? Anyway, Cain is making a complaint. He's saying, the punishment you are giving me is more than I can bear. Well, if you ask me, he's getting off light. You know, let's look at the Bible. The Bible says eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So the fact that he killed his brother, he should have been killed. But God doesn't do this because God knows that by killing, Abel's already dead. He knows by killing Cain, the line of man will be stalled until Adam and Eve have another kid, if they ever did. You know what I mean? So God's not going to let the line of man end like that. No. Why? Because through the line of man, Jesus Christ comes. Okay? And he said, surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. Meaning, I can't even come into your presence. I can't associate myself with you. Literally cut off from God's blessings, speaking to God, talking to God, having anything to do with God. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond, with a person with no home on the earth. And it will happen that anyone who finds me will kill me. Okay? In other words, God, you're sending me out. I'm not going to have a home anymore. I'm not going to be able to have any kind of home. I'm basically going to be a homeless person, always. The ground is not going to feed me. I'm not going to be able to get any kind of foods. So I'm probably going to starve. And on top of that, I'm scared that other people are going to harm me. And he says, anyone who finds me will kill me. Well, rightfully so. You killed your brother. And the Lord said to him, therefore, whoever kills Cain, so whoever decides, now notice what he says here. He doesn't say no one's going to kill you. In other words, he doesn't say I take away man's free will. What he says is whoever kills, meaning if anyone should kill you, vengeance shall be taken on that person sevenfold. So vengeance times 7. Okay. And the Lord set a mark on Cain, otherwise known as the mark of Cain. Okay. Mark on Cain. No one knows what this mark looks like. Least anyone finding him should kill him. In other words, the mark was to identify Cain as Cain. So that if anyone came across this mark, they immediately knew this was Cain. And that if they killed him, for whatever reason, 7 times punishment. Vengeance. Okay? Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord. He left the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden. Not the Garden of Eden, but the area Eden. Okay? So on the east side. Okay? And Cain knew his wife. So Cain had a wife. Okay, Cain knew his wife. And she conceived, got pregnant, and bore Enoch. Okay. So Cain became a father of Enoch. So God is still blessing Cain at this point. He's still blessing. He's not associating with him, but he's blessing him from far away, if you get the drift. Okay. Enoch. And he built a city. So Cain built a city. And he called the name of that city after the name of his son, Enoch. So Enoch was both a person and a sea, and a person and a city. Okay. To Enoch. Okay. And so now they're getting into the lineage of Cain, the descendants. Now, why is this important? Because all the other people that come in the stories of the Bible later on, okay, all those people come from this line, okay. To Enoch was born Irad. So Irad was the son, I think the son of Enoch. It doesn't say whether they're female or male. So this might be either the son or daughter. Put it that way. Okay. Irad was born to Enoch. So the child of Enoch. Okay. And Mahujael was the child of Irad. Okay. And Methusael was the child of Mahujael. Okay. And Lamech was the child of Methusael. Okay. So now we're going, this is lineage, so we're going probably a couple 100 years, maybe, give or take, because they're all having kids, and you have Enoch to Irad, there's one generation, Irad to Mehuja, or whatever, there's second generation, Methuselah, there's third generation, Lamech, there's fourth generation. So 4 generations later, okay, however long that took, came Lamech. Then Lamech took for himself 2 wives. Not cool, in my opinion. Okay, he took 2 wives. The name of one was Ada. So one wife was named Ada or Ada. And the name of the second wife was Zillah. Okay. And Ada bore Jabal. So Jabal was the child of Lamech and Ada. Okay. And Jabal, he became the father of those who dwell in the tents and have livestock. Okay. The brother, the one born to Zillah, okay, I believe was Jabal. Okay, his brother's name was Jabal. He was the father of all those who play the harp and flute. In other words, Jabal had a talent for taking care of animals, a skill. And wait. Sorry, hold on. I gotta look at this. Bor Jabal, he was the father of. Oh, okay. Jabal and Jubal. Okay, so I had to reread this real quick. So Jabal, Jabal, was having a talent of being able to take care of livestock and care for livestock, whereas Jubal, Jubal, he became the father or the ancestor of all those who have musical talent. Okay. So those two were born of Ada, I think. Yeah. And as for Zillah, okay, Zillah, this is the other wife, okay, and it does actually use the word wife for both of them. It calls two wives, okay. She gave birth to Tubal-Cain. Tubal-Cain, okay. And Tubal-Cain had a skill of metal work, so bronze, iron, things like that, okay. And the sister of Tubal was Naamah. So Zillah had what I assume is a guy and a boy and a girl, okay. Naamah is the sister, okay. Then Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. Okay. Wives of Lamech, listen to my speech. So he's saying, hey, pay attention to what I'm saying. It's very important. Okay. For I have killed a man for wounding me. I've killed someone for wounding me. So now we get a little context. Okay. That Lamech has killed someone for wounding him. Even a young man for hurting me. So he's also killed someone. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, then Lamech 77-fold. Okay? In other words, he's laying I guess the same thing that God laid on Cain, he's laying that on Lamech. Lamech's laying it on himself. He's saying, I recognize what I've done wrong, and I've called down the curse from God, that if anyone kills me, it won't just be sevenfold, it'll be 77-fold. Okay? So Adam and Eve had Cain. So if you want to learn people of the Bible, Adam and Eve had Cain and Abel. Okay? Now, it says here, and Adam knew his wife again, meaning had sex with his wife again. And she bore a son. She gave birth to a son and named him Seth. So Seth. So who were the children of Adam and Eve? Cain, Abel, Seth. Okay? So far. For God has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, who Cain killed. So in other words, God has given a blessing back. Okay? The devil took something, God gives it back. Okay? And he gives it something even better. Okay? And as for Seth, to him also a son was born. Okay? So as Seth grew older, Seth had his own son named Enosh. Enosh. Okay? Then men begin to call on the name of the Lord. In other words, men in that time started to desire a relationship with God. And that is at the heart of the purpose of why you are even here on this earth. If anyone ever asks you, what's the purpose of life? Simple. A relationship with God. To serve God, to worship God, to love God. That's the whole purpose for creation. That's the whole purpose for us being created. Okay? Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. That is the end of chapter 4. I will see you again for chapter 5 tomorrow when we continue discussing the family of Adam. Okay? Be blessed and take care.